Today's story is about something we've all done, booking an Airbnb. But let me just say, after what happened to me, I'm sticking to hotels from now on. This one still keeps me up at night. So grab a drink, settle in, and let me tell you about the Airbnb with no checkout. This happened last summer. My friends and I decided to rent an Airbnb for a weekend getaway in this tiny, picturesque town. It was the kind of place with cobblestone streets, little bakeries, and no chain stores in sight. The Airbnb itself was a cozy little cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by woods. It looked perfect in the photos, rustic, charming, and secluded. Exactly what we were looking for. When we arrived, the host wasn't there to greet us, but they left a key in the lockbox and a note that said, "Welcome, make yourselves at home." The cottage was beautiful inside. Antique furniture, a big stone fireplace, and these old black and white photos hanging on the walls. The photos creeped me out a little, to be honest. They were of people who didn't look happy. You know how in old photos people sometimes have that blank stare? These felt different. Like they were staring at me, not the camera. The first night was fine. We cooked dinner, played board games, and hung out. But around midnight, things started getting weird. My friend Sarah went to the kitchen to grab a drink and came back pale as a sheet. She said she saw a shadow move across the room, but when she turned the lights on, there was no one there. We all laughed it off, saying she was just spooking herself out. The next morning, I woke up early and went outside to get some fresh air. That's when I noticed something strange. The woods around the house were completely silent. No birds, no bugs, nothing. Just this eerie, heavy quiet. It gave me the creeps, so I went back inside. Later that day, things started escalating. The power flickered on and off randomly, even though the weather was fine. Doors we knew we'd closed were suddenly open. At one point, Sarah swore she heard whispering coming from one of the bedrooms, but when we checked, no one was there. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I thought it was one of my friends, so I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. I grabbed my phone for light and peeked out of my room. The hallway was empty, but I could still hear the footsteps. They were heading toward the living room. I woke everyone up, and we decided we'd had enough. We packed our stuff and were ready to leave, but when we got to the front door, it wouldn't open. The lock wouldn't budge, no matter how hard we tried. Even the windows wouldn't open. It was like the house didn't want us to leave. That's when we heard it. A soft, rhythmic knocking. It was coming from inside one of the bedrooms. We stood frozen, staring at the closed door. None of us wanted to open it, but we couldn't just stand there. I mustered up all my courage, grabbed a fireplace poker, and opened the door. The room was empty, except for one thing. The mirror on the wall had words written on it, like they were scrawled in condensation. "You can't leave." We spent the rest of the night huddled together in the living room, too scared to sleep. At sunrise, the front door finally unlocked on its own. We bolted out of there and didn't look back. When we told the host what happened, they acted surprised, but I could tell they knew something. Later, we found out the house had a reputation. Guests reported strange experiences, but the reviews were always taken down. So, yeah, if an Airbnb seems too good to be true, maybe think twice before booking. You might not get to leave. Story 2. This story is about a road trip gone wrong in ways I still can't explain. It's about a place that shouldn't exist, and if you ever stumble across it, just keep driving. Trust me. So, let's get into it. This happened a few months ago. I was driving cross-country for a job interview, taking back roads because I thought it would be faster and more scenic. It was one of those long, lonely stretches of road where you can go miles without seeing another car. Late in the afternoon, my gas light came on. I figured I'd pull into the next town to fill up, but the miles kept ticking by and there was nothing but trees and empty road. Just as I started to panic, I saw a sign that said, "Welcome to Ashwood." A couple of miles later, I drove into this tiny town. It looked straight out of the 1950s. Small brick buildings, an old-fashioned diner, and a gas station with one pump. Relieved, I pulled into the gas station and got out to fill up. That's when I noticed something strange. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, and the town was completely silent. No birds, no cars, not even the hum of electricity, just this oppressive, unnatural quiet. Still, I was desperate, so I started pumping gas. That's when I saw someone watching me from the diner across the street. It was a man, standing completely still, staring at me through the window. I waved, but he didn't move. Feeling uneasy, I finished pumping and went inside to pay. The station attendant looked normal enough, an older guy with a weathered face. But when I handed him my card, he shook his head and said, "Cash only." I was annoyed, but handed him some cash. As he counted it, I asked, "So, how far is it to the highway?" He stopped counting, looked up at me and said, "There's no highway." I laughed nervously. "What do you mean? I just need to get back on Route 17. He stared at me for a long moment before saying, "You should leave before dark." That was enough for me. I hurried back to my car, but when I turned onto the main road, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The man from the diner was now standing in the middle of the street, staring at my car. And he wasn't alone. More people had come out of the buildings, men, women, even children, all standing perfectly still, all staring at me. I floored it, swerving around them, and sped out of town. I kept driving for what felt like hours, but no matter how far I went, I couldn't find my way back to the main road. Every turn I took brought me back to that same "Welcome to Ashwood" sign. By now, it was getting dark. The heavy feeling in the air grew worse, like the town itself was alive and didn't want me to leave. Desperate, I decided to stop at the gas station again and ask the attendant for directions. But when I pulled up, the station was completely dark. The windows were shattered, and the pump was rusted over, like it had been abandoned for years. I checked my phone, hoping to get a signal, but the battery, which had been at 70% earlier, was now completely dead. That's when I heard it. A faint whispering coming from the direction of the diner. The windows were dark, but I could see shadows moving inside. I didn't stick around to find out what they were. I jumped back in my car and started driving again, this time with no plan, no direction, just away. Eventually, the trees thinned, and I saw headlights in the distance. I followed them, and, to my relief, ended up back on a main highway. When I stopped at a rest area to catch my breath, I told a worker there about the town. She frowned and said, "There's no Ashwood around here. Closest town is 50 miles back." I pulled out my map to prove her wrong, but there was nothing. No Ashwood, no sign I'd ever been there. I don't know what I stumbled into that day, but one thing's for sure. If you ever see a town that feels wrong, trust your gut. Keep driving. Story 3. This story is about something we've all dealt with, roommates. But trust me, this isn't your typical roommate horror story about dirty dishes or loud music. This one still makes my skin crawl. So, let's get into it. A few years ago, I moved into this cheap apartment right out of college. It was in an old building that had definitely seen better days. Creaky floors, peeling paint, and doors that didn't quite fit their frames. But hey, it was affordable. The lease was for a 2-bedroom unit, but I couldn't afford the place on my own, so I found a roommate online. Her name was Lily. She seemed normal, quiet, worked a lot, and wasn't into throwing parties, which was perfect for me. We got along fine at first, though she was odd. She didn't talk much and always kept her bedroom door locked, even when she wasn't home. About a month after she moved in, weird things started happening. Little things at first. Lights flickering. Doors creaking open on their own. And strange noises at night, like footsteps in the hallway. I figured it was just an old building settling, but it still gave me the creeps. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of whispering. It was faint, like it was coming from Lily's room. I figured she was on the phone, so I tried to go back to sleep. But then I heard it again. Louder this time, and it wasn't just one voice. It sounded like a full conversation, but I couldn't make out the words. The next morning, I asked Lily about it. She just stared at me for a second, then shrugged and said, "You must have been dreaming." That night, I stayed up late, working on my laptop in the living room. Around midnight, I heard her bedroom door creak open. I glanced over, expecting to see Lily, but no one was there. Her door was wide open, but her room was pitch black. "Lily?" I called out, but there was no answer. I got up to check, and when I peeked into her room, I felt a chill run down my spine. The room was completely empty. No bed, no furniture, no clothes, nothing. I stood there in shock, trying to process what I was seeing. That's when I heard the front door open behind me. I turned around, and there was Lily, standing in the doorway with a blank expression. "What are you doing in my room?" she asked, her voice cold. I stammered, trying to explain, but she just brushed past me and slammed the door shut. The next day, I decided I'd had enough. I knocked on her door to talk, but she didn't answer. When I checked the front door, her shoes and coat were gone, so I figured she was at work. I decided to snoop. When I opened her door, the room was empty again. This time, though, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A faint outline on the floorboards, like there had once been furniture there. I called the landlord to ask about Lily. He sounded confused and said, "There's no Lily on the lease. You're the only tenant." I hung up and started packing my stuff. That night, I stayed at a friend's place and never went back. To this day, I have no idea who or what Lily was. Was she a ghost? A figment of my imagination? Or something worse? All I know is, if your roommate keeps their door locked all the time, maybe don't try to find out why.